Thanks for joining us at the 2022 GFA Convention and Competitions. My name is Chuck Houlihan. I'm your proud Education Director for the Guitar Foundation of America, and I'm really excited and extremely honored to be joined today by my good friend and cross-state colleague, Gwen Marie Lurk from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Gwen, how are you? Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Chuck. I really appreciate it. And hello to everyone out there in the GFA world.
I've had many experiences with you over the last couple of years, and I feel that I've gotten to know you a little bit more each time because we always get into these great conversations. Our first really long conversation was at Allstate in New Mexico. And I think it was at that time that my wheels started spinning, that you're someone that has an awful lot to offer to a conversation. And when I was trying to design some really cool sessions for our GFA members this year, you're one of the first people that I thought of. I thought there's some really amazing ideas that you have and some really great talking points that you've joined us with for happy hours before. But I thought I really wanted to have an opportunity to sit down and chat with you formally and share these thoughts with everyone. So I'm happy to say that today's session is titled Guitar Equity and Advocacy for All. So Gwen, could we start by just asking you to say a few words about your background as a composer, as a conductor, as a guitarist, and as an educator, and how that and all of those really experiences combined have shaped your opinion?
Sure, absolutely. So I started playing guitar very young. I was about 3.5 when I started. And my first teacher was Russian. So I didn't speak much Russian. He didn't speak much English, which, as it turns out, is the perfect way to educate someone who's under the age of 4. You just do a lot of, back and forth rote playing and pointing and pantomiming. So I started very young and was madly in love with the guitar from a very early age. But I was also just a musician in the making and probably didn't realize it. And I came from a family that was not necessarily a musical family. We had musicians, but not many. And the guitar was inexpensive. I came from a demographic circumstances that we could not necessarily afford a piano. I mean, I wanted a grand piano when I was 6. We couldn't necessarily afford that, but the guitar was a way that I could get into music and stay into music. And from there, I entered the band world. Because I was a little kid who knew how to read music already, and my high school band director was not stupid. He needed somebody to play in the percussion section and play bells. So, and I got to play with the big kids. And from there, that created a lifelong love affair with band music as well. And so while people will say to me, isn't it weird that you're a guitarist and a band person, and then you're also a composer? I say it's not weird at all. I think guitarists are really, some people would say maybe we're the mutts of the music world, but I would say that we are the well-rounded folk of the music world. And most guitarists that I know have a deep desire to learn a lot about everything, not just a little bit about the shallow stuff. So that's my background. And, education-wise, I had the privilege and the ability to attend a conservatory while I was still in prep school. So I graduated from prep and conservatory at the same time. And then because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, my guitar teacher said, you're still young enough, you should go get a real college degree. And I did. I went and got a degree in liberal arts, which was probably the best thing for me as a composer ever, was to study literature and history, and not in addition to the hardcore nuts and bolts of music theory, etc. And so and from there, all of that combined into conducting and performing and composing and educating. As it turns out, I really love being a teacher. I resisted it for many years. I fell into the whole trope of only those who can't do are the ones who teach, which is just a load of everything with alphabetical letters on it. I just realized where I was. So anyway, I fell into that trope for a long time and avoided it. And then as it turns out, I'm probably more passionate about teaching and education and guitar education than I am about anything else in my life. So that's how I ended up where I am. That's me.
How about a little bit about your role currently as president and education director for Guitar New Mexico?
Sure. So Guitar New Mexico is a classical guitar society. in that there are many across the United States, right, where folks who get together, and they usually used to just promote and bring in performers and promote guitar concerts, that kind of thing. Guitar New Mexico was very involved in the education aspect of guitar from the beginning. And as a private nonprofit, was actually very much an advocate for bringing in all state into the school systems. And so New Mexico was the first all state to have guitar. And so what we do at Guitar New Mexico is we have a multi-pronged approach. We produce the annual Classical Guitar Festival, which has a community festival ensemble component, but also offers master classes and workshops, as well as performances by professional guitarists. And we do a youth ensemble and a guitar chamber player. So youth ensemble is exactly what it sounds like. It is for 9 through 12. Meets after schools in the meets after school in the evenings, and conducted by one of our local teachers. And they do ensemble music. I would say they do high-end high school ensemble music, and it's designed to help students play in an ensemble. Perhaps they're coming from a school that doesn't necessarily have enough kids in guitar to front a full ensemble. Yeah. And then the guitar chamber players is the guitar equivalent of the community band. That's our community band. That's for the guitar enthusiasts, the adult guitar enthusiasts. There's a photo of it right there from our guitar festival. So this chamber group meets throughout the school year once a week and does a couple of concerts a year. And we also go out and play in outreach places. But then at the festival, it kind of combines into the festival ensemble as well. And then the other thing that Guitar New Mexico does is an outreach program, which we are combining with our ensembles into our new education division. And literally our outreach program is exactly what it sounds like. We bring in an artist in residence and we send them out to the schools to do clinics, meet with the kids, play a little bit for them, talk to students about being a professional musician, maybe talk to students about being a musician, but not necessarily having it be your profession. It depends upon the clinician. So that's what Guitar New Mexico does, in addition to bringing in performers for classical guitar concerts.
I think that the experience I had with the artist program through Guitar New Mexico, one of the things that stood out was that the programs were not all high school guitar programs, that there are middle school guitar programs. And I know this is something we've spoken about in the past, and something that you're very passionate about. I am. The fact that we really need to foster more middle school guitar programs. Would you talk a bit about the importance of middle school guitar education, how that plays into and impacts really high school and then college guitar education, but also how that might impact, guitar societies and nonprofits as they, build future audiences? Sure.
And so obviously, if you want a high school program, you have two choices. You can do it into the point where you have raw beginners coming in the ninth grade. So that first day when they enter as a high school freshman, maybe they have had a little guitar, they haven't had a little guitar. You never know what you're going to get, particularly in the public schools, right? Maybe you'll get kids who have the privilege of having private lessons. Most likely you'll have a lot of kids who have taught themselves off of the internet and various social media streaming services available to them. You can do that. And you can you can make a pretty good high school guitar program by working really hard at it. But I think the better thing would be to go into the middle school and start them younger. And I am quite passionate about this. And here is why. The younger you start a student on guitar, then the more likely they will be a lifelong learner of that guitar, right? You want to start them when they're young enough that they, quite frankly, they forget how hard it can get sometimes, right? And not to mention the fact that every 10-year-old I have ever met always wants to learn how to play guitar. So that's great, but why leave them on their own to sort of stumble and mumble their way through it? Why not get guitar teachers in there to help guide them through the process as they learn and discover? So that's great for the high school program. And then you'll have a better high school program. That certainly makes sense. You have a better high school program, then you are more likely to have better college programs, because you'll more likely have students who want to audition for being a guitar major in college, or even just audition for the guitar ensemble in college. But here's where it plays into for guitar societies. If we start students younger, they are more likely to fall head over heels, ridiculously in love with the guitar, as I say. Then they will become lifelong learners after they graduate college. So what if they don't become a guitar major, right? I say the more doctors and dentists and lawyers and mechanics who play guitar, the better, right? And so that leads into what the band world has known for years, which is the community ensemble experience. So that's, to me, that's why it's so very important to start them young. Middle school is a good age to start guitar. I would say that we need to be starting guitar down in the 3rd grade, and ukulele for the years before that. But where it comes for guitar societies or guitar clubs or performance societies, whatever you call yourself, we are the nonprofits who can do some fundraising, because schools don't have a lot of money. Schools don't have a lot of teachers. They probably are not going to be able to pay a full-time guitar teacher, right? So the nonprofits can come in and can help assist with that by having education programs through their mission, by helping subsidize, perhaps even outright pay for a clinician coming in, or pay for a teacher to come in once a week at a disadvantaged middle school somewhere. Or make it create a guitar class for middle school kids. Transportation is usually an issue at that age, so it is better to go into the schools rather than have busing or something like that. That to me is guitar societies, guitar clubs, whatever we want to call ourselves. We have the ability to fundraise in a way that your public school can't, and we can assist them with what their music education in that sense. And then it all comes back on the positive side for us, because you have just created your own audience. You have grown your own feeder system for your own audience.
So what steps might a guitar society, a nonprofit guitar organization, again, whatever the name, whatever the label is, outside of public education, how can these programs supplement, support, feed into, create this healthy ecosystem without supplanting teachers or without taking a program in a wrong direction? I know something that I've always felt strongly about and really firmly believe is that if you can get guitar in the classroom during the classroom hours, you're going to have the greatest degree of success as compared to quote unquote after school programs. And I don't mean to say that in any condescending manner, but how can organizations support and supplement without supplanting, I guess is what I'm asking.
The number one way to support and supplement is to make it your mission to support and supplement, and know that there is the danger of supplanting, and just be aware of that danger. That's the other danger to having private nonprofits come in is something called donor-driven curriculum, where a donor says, I will give you such and such money, but this is what I want you to teach. They're not saying, I want you to teach guitar. They start saying, I want you to specifically do this, etc. So the best way to avoid that is to get the educators on your side. Work directly with the teachers. Work with the other music teachers. Maybe they don't know how to teach guitar. Maybe they're a choir or orchestra or band director, right? Those are busy folks. They'd be delighted if a nonprofit says, we've got this program, we're going to work with you on the curriculum, but we're going to pay for the part-time teacher to come in during the school year. It'll be part of our outreach or our artist in residence program. That doesn't touch their band budget or their orchestra budget, and they would love that. Most administrators are grateful too. And some of the, you do have to do some administrative day-to-day work. You have to do the background checks, and you have to be careful who you send in, because not every great performer is a good teacher. We've all been there. Right? There's quite a few fabulous musicians who are wonderful performers, but they just are horrible in the classroom. So you have to pick and choose. And the best way to pick and choose is to work with somebody who knows what they're doing in terms of music education, specifically what they're doing in terms of guitar education. But if your only resource is the local band director, then work directly with that band director and make sure that they know that you are doing this to support them because you love them, but you're not trying to replace them. And that's the best way to go about it. The other stuff is nuts and bolts. Nonprofits can do private fundraising. Right, nonprofits can directly ask for donor, money directly from certain people. You can go out and you can pinpoint. Nonprofits can raise the money and buy the guitars and donate them to the school, that kind of thing. All of that helps supplement without supplanting the music teacher. So that's my answer. Work with the teacher.
This is great, Gwen. I think I know something we have going on here in Arizona, where I am, is our Phoenix Guitar Society, and we've really done exactly that. We've done a really good job at raising funds and less restrictive within how we use them and how we're supporting the school programs. And we've kept really at the heart of our mission, trying to do exactly that: support, not supplant all of the hardworking school teachers that are out there creating our ecosystem. And I think something we've tried to do here in Arizona, and I think we're doing a good job, is a model from other states like New Mexico, like Texas, like Virginia, like Nevada. And that is, there's just a real team mentality. There's a real community approach. I guess in a world of lone wolves and stuff, some of the most successful regions that I see are regions that are really all working together in collaboration, not in competition.
I absolutely agree. And I see that, I'm in both worlds. I'm in the band world and guitar world. And I see the guitar world as being far more team oriented than the band world. Not that I'm trying to, diss my band folks, but I just think it's, honestly, I think it's because the guitar is not necessarily seen as a major program yet. And so we're still a little bit of an underdog, and we keep fighting and fighting. And so we fight with the people next to us, and that creates sort of a team sense. And that's the way to do it, is to work hand in hand as a team per region. I mean, we've all stolen great ideas from Texas. Texas has stolen great ideas from New Mexico. We love Arizona, right? So if you work together as a larger region, that is the way to do it. So maybe the band world can learn from us eventually.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Gwen, I want to take us in a different direction for a moment.
Sure.
Obviously connected, but something else that I've heard you speak about in the past, and I know I feel similar about. So I guess we'll preach to the converted. But the idea here is to get these ideas out across to our greater guitar education community. And I've certainly heard you talk about this, but I've heard several talk about this idea of the label and maybe changing the definition of classical guitar to classic guitar, and what that might mean in the classroom, or what that does mean in the classroom, what that might look like for solo and ensemble repertoire, and maybe not so much or not exclusively music education, but also concerts, some music performance, this idea of classic guitar. What are your thoughts about that, Gwen?
Well, I think we need to step back and say, what the heck is a classical guitar? In the region where I live now, a classical guitar is commonly called a Spanish guitar. And what they mean is a concert classic style guitar with nylon strings, a slotted peg head, a tied string bridge, to get into the nitty gritty of guitar geek, right? But definitely the nylon strings, and a certain scale size for the neck, and a certain width and thickness of the neck. To those folks, they'll call it a Spanish guitar, but they'll also say it's a classical guitar. Well, the guitar wasn't really wasn't a strong performing instrument during the classical era. So I'm not sure where we came up with the name classical. But what I mean when I say classic guitar is actually more of a mindset.
Yeah.
Because we know what are our kids wanting to learn now? They want to learn everything. And you can play any style and genre of music on any style of guitar, including playing Bach on an electric guitar, right? I think Bach sounds best. I think Bach sounds best when I play it on my jazz archtop, right? But the difference to me in classic guitar is actually a mindset of how we teach the guitar, how we are performing the guitar, and how we're looking at it. Somehow in our guitar world, we have let this sort of subset kind of bubble up of, oh, I'm proud that I don't know how to read music. And I only learned how to play this by ear. Those are good skills. Obviously, learning how to play by ear is a really good oral skill. You absolutely have to have it. But I don't think it's great to be proud that you don't know how to read standard notation. Yeah. Music is a language, and you need to be able to read the language. You need to be able to communicate with another musician other than, no, it goes like this. Okay, no, you're still getting it wrong. Okay, can you actually graphically represent it in a way so that you can send it off around the world? Also, just like I play with my garage band, and we had a couple of rehearsals, and now we're looking for gigs. I'm like, but are you really rehearsed? Have you, it's a mindset to me. Classic guitar to me is a mindset of really taking it seriously. As serious as someone studying violin, as serious as somebody studying mallet percussion, as serious as a vocalist learning opera, really diving in to me. So to me, that's my personal definition of classic. I would be absolutely delighted going to a guitar concert that had jazz, rock and roll, what they call finger style, which is really just classical technique on a steel string guitar, right? Name another one. Oh, how about some gypsy jazz, some Django jazz, a little bit of that. All of that
in my game.
Yeah, all of that in one concert. I definitely will be paying for that ticket. So to me, that's what classic means. And I just think that we have to change the mindset of how seriously we take guitar pedagogy and guitar education. What about you? You have an opinion on it?
I do. And I think you've really captured it. Some of the things that I've long talked about are this idea of transferable knowledge or transferable skills or even transferable experiences.
Yes.
It's not that, it's exclusive to music written in the 19th century by Europeans or something. It's this idea of this full scope of, yes, how we engage with music, how we learn music, how we perform music, how we train ourselves. And something that in my career as an educator, I've been proud to know that my students, when they approach the instrument and when they approach their training in classic style, it's absolutely not exclusive to classical genre music.
No.
But the experience really allows them to learn any style. I've proudly also tested that myself as I've later in life as an adult, very much outside of formal school, have used that classic mindset, that classic training, that classic atmosphere, if you will, to absorb, engage with, and ultimately learn other styles at a pretty good level. And I don't feel I would have been able to be as successful if I hadn't had that classic training. And I think we're talking about marketing maybe a little bit here, Gwen, and about how we label things.
It's language. I agree. It's language and marketing, and maybe classic isn't the right word. It made for a quick soundbite. I think I said it. I think I first said it one time in front of students, and I said, I don't teach classical guitar. I teach classic guitar, but that is true. It's a formality and being as serious about it as anyone else.
Yeah. Well, that takes us pretty well into really the larger topic at hand here, with equity and advocacy for all. We hear a lot these days about access and equity in all things education, really in all things. So accessibility, equity, and advocacy for the guitarist, for a guitar student. What does that look like in our guitar world?
Well, first things first, as an educator, I'm going to define accessibility. There's a couple different definitions. One is the physical accessibility. If you have a student who has a physical difference in some way, are they able to play guitar? chances are, yes, you'll have to modify a few things. There's that accessibility. That's not what I actually am talking about when I use the word accessibility. I mean availability. Access. Can a student get their hands on a decent playing instrument? And that comes down to economics. So it's really an economic accessibility. I just want to be really clear about that we're not necessarily talking about ADA. That's a whole other topic. So yeah, economic accessibility. The guitar is, I just read a recent report from NAM. The guitar is now the world's most popular instrument. Guitar and guitar-related instruments. So it long surpassed the violin. My apologies to the orchestra folks. But it has now surpassed the piano, including keyboard, electronic keyboard. That caught me by surprise. And I think a lot has to do with the fact that guitars are relatively cheap.
Yeah.
A decent student, high-level student guitar is, I think, about 1/6 the cost of a saxophone. That will not be decent, right? Like a beginning saxophone. Beginning saxophone only takes a student so far. And then they need a next step up, and then they need another step up, and they're going to go to college, they need a professional level. One of the things that we've learned here in New Mexico, we have a certain style and brand of guitars. There's like a certain price point, and we laughingly call it the, quote, all-state guitar. And that price point is about $650 to $700 retail. That's not even what the schools have to pay, right? That is a price point that is still difficult for many students to meet, but is more accessible, is more economically accessible. So that flows into equity too. This means that we can get a harmonizing instrument, an instrument that can play chords as well as single line notes. We can get a harmonizing instrument into the hands of more students than we can get pianos. And again, my apologies to all of my friends who are pianists, but those instruments are large and bulky, and if you are,
they don't travel well.
They don't travel well. And if you're from a family that does not have many funds or finds itself having to move a lot, a piano is probably not in your life. Yeah. But a guitar could be in a child's life. And so that to me is accessibility, is getting it into more hands. And that flows into equity. Guitar can be used to make more young students musicians. We can make more musicians. We can allow more students to become creators of their own creative work and create their own creative path. Sorry to use the word create so much, but that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about creating little creators, right? The guitar is very useful for that. It's difficult to do. You can play the guitar on your own. You can play it in an ensemble. You can hit it, you can whack it, you can make percussion noises with it, you can play beautiful single singing melody lines on it, sometimes all within the same piece. And that means that we can get it into more hands of more students out there and start allowing them to become creative artists. And for advocacy for me is really more like, it's not necessarily advocating for the student. I'm doing that already with the accessibility and the equity fight. The advocacy is really for guitar programs. Equity and advocacy for guitar programs. We've got a big mountain of a fight ahead of us. The band world is entrenched. The orchestra world is very entrenched. The choir world is very entrenched. Like guitar, choir is an inexpensive method of getting music into students, right? And they require no instrument. So let's pull choir out of the discussion for now, because that's the vocal side of things. Let's just stick to just the instrumental side of things. It's legacy and habit to have band programs or to have an orchestra program, usually band programs. Even for the small schools, I'm not even going to refer to the big, huge, performing schools in Texas. Even the small schools that we have on top of a mountaintop somewhere here in New Mexico, the first thing they say is, well, we can't afford a music program. And what they really mean is we cannot afford all of these expensive band programs. So my advocacy is, here's a way for you to afford a public school music program. And that is, let's use the guitar, right? Let's create our future generation of musicians. Let's get them started on guitar. when the time comes and as money comes in, yeah, absolutely have that middle school band, absolutely have that high school band. I'm a band person. I'm not saying kill all bands. I'm saying when schools say to their school board or to their parents, we can't afford a music program, or we cannot afford a music teacher, what they mean is we cannot afford a band teacher. We cannot afford a band program. What an intermediate high school tuba is what, $12,000? Dating myself here. $12,000.
There's your guitar program.
There's an entire guitar program for 2 years. I could probably make that stretch 3 years if you gave me that budget, right? So there's a guitar program right there. We could touch 12 to 15 kids instead of a single kid on that tuba, right? And again, I'm not trying to pick a fight with my band people, because I am also in that world. But I see the inequity and the lack of access that happens when schools only have the mindset of band or just orchestra, right? So
something that comes to mind for me, Gwen, is this idea of legacy, and it's just quote unquote the way it is, the way it's always been. So something that I admire from the band world are these leadership programs that I see, and as an outsider, if you will, I just must confess I didn't have a high school musical experience. This was entirely something of college and beyond for me. So I didn't come up in that environment where musicians were being trained, but also advocates and leaders were being trained. And if I may be so bold, I've been in the game 20 pushing 30 years. 30 years ago, there wasn't a lot of guitar in the classroom. I don't mean to offend anyone who was in the classroom then, because I know it existed in pockets. 20 years ago, we started to see some activity. And to me, in the last 10 years, things have really just exploded. And now guitar is everywhere. But where I'm going with this is I'm still not convinced we have a lineage of educators that came from a program. Now, I know that's starting to change. That stuff takes time. But where I'm going is that we have wonderful guitarists, wonderful musicians, and wonderful educators, but they might not know how to advocate for themselves, for their students, for their programs, and they might not have those leadership skills. And these are things that I think are maybe somewhat missing from our guitar education. I think it's coming, and I think we'll see it. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that idea, the ideas of advocacy and leadership that are trained so young that then turns into part of a teacher's portfolio.
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, it does go back to getting guitar into the hands of middle schoolers, if not younger, right? So let's not forget that. So all of this is really linked together. I agree with you about the lack of leadership programs and kind of growing our own. And I'm saying this as somebody who was for decades the only girl in any group of guitarists, right? I still remember to this day the first time I saw a professional guitarist who happened to be female, right? And that was such a vivid experience for me. So there's not a lot of leadership. There's also something I like to call street cred. I think we guitar educators are still seen as music educators who don't have a lot of street credibility, right? Which is ironic because most of our education and our experience comes from the street. It comes from working in the bands, and it comes from self-teaching yourself with whatever you have available, whether it's an old Mel Bay book or now YouTube or some other streaming service, with all of these lessons. But let's look at that. When you go on to a place like some kind of streaming service, there are thousands of guitar lessons out there. And I, as somebody who has seriously studied the art of guitar pedagogy, look at these lessons and go, oh my gosh, this is so bad, right? So there's no curation of what is out there. I think you're right. We are going to get there. And the only way we're going to get there is just start growing our own, right? And start leading the way and creating our own leaderships. I think GFA could be a leader in creating these leaders. and not just necessarily bringing in like well-established guitar directors. Bring in the well-established guitar directors with the folks who have just started out. I don't know the statistics for this, but I strongly suspect a large number of licensed guitar teachers, guitar educators licensed to teach in a public setting probably went the alternative route with an alternative licensure. I went the alternative route. So I did not come up as a music education major in college. I think maybe that might make us better teachers down the road, right? Or the fact that we're willing to accept folks a large number of folks who have an alternative license makes us a little different, and goes back to that whole working within a team and the teamwork kind of mindset that is more prevalent in the guitar world than perhaps the band world.
Absolutely. No, your point, I think you're right on. We've just expanded the point, which is how we grow our future educators, and how this idea of advocacy is sometimes taught really from the earliest stages, to be an advocate for your art form, and to be an advocate for your genre, your instrument, your form. And this idea of the leadership programs that are so prevalent in bands and band programs, and how part of that leadership really builds advocacy. And I think that's just an important point to everything that you've presented here today, Gwen. And I would just pull you back in by saying, what one or two, talking points or action items, because our listeners, our GFA members are studio instructors, they're classroom instructors, they're pre-college, they're college. We just have a huge diversity of what form of education our members take. So I wonder what one or two points that you might summarize that would help folks impact change and make our community stronger and more sustainable long-term.
First thing I would say is, remember, you do not have to be an education major in order to study education. Those of us who came to teaching from a different route still have the responsibility of studying education and what works and what doesn't work. And we have the responsibility of being flexible to change when we smash nose first into the things that do not work in the classroom, right? So you don't necessarily have to be a music education major in order to be a good educator. Now, having said that, I think some of the things that maybe the nonprofit side can do is help the higher education institutions develop true guitar pedagogy and guitar education programs within their music education departments. I personally am always saddened whenever I meet a young music educator who's maybe hasn't graduated yet. I ask them what their major is. It's guitar. Yay, guitar. And then I ask them what ensemble they've been given to conduct, and it's the choir. Right? So they've been shoved in with the choir kids because your local state university music education department doesn't know what to do with the guitar kids. So that's on us, and that's on GFA, and that's on those people like me. We need to go work on the higher education side as well. Now, as for other things that you can do, ask the people who know what they're doing. Go find a program that you admire and ask them what they're doing. But more specifically, don't ask them what their successes were. Ask them about all the things that fell apart along the way until they started having the success, because that's where you're going to learn the most, right? It's great to have a shiny program that gets a little stamp of approval and you've won all the awards and your kids go to all state. We want that for every one of our students. Absolutely. But ask the teacher who made that happen. Ask them about all the things that didn't happen along the way. And maybe that's a conversation you can't have in one sitting with that person. And maybe you need to buy them the beverage of their choice or something along those lines to get them to open up. But ask them about their failures and how they use those failures to get to their successes. And that will help anyone who's teaching. Private studio teachers, I have a private studio. When I graduated from the conservatory, it was expected that I would teach privately. Nobody told me how to do that. Why are we not training our folks at that age as well, right? So again, Chuck, that's on us, and it's on us, the educators who maybe have some mileage on us, and it's on our big associations like Guitar Foundation to help us get there.
Gwen, such a fabulous conversation. I always enjoy speaking with you.
I always love
And
speaking
this
with you
time,
too, Chuck.
I'm particularly glad that we're able to share this conversation with everyone, because these are conversations that need to happen. So I invite everyone that's been viewing this to take part in our live question and answer session, which will be happening at the end of today's Educator Track Day. There are 2 other fabulous sessions with another set of great educators that have so much to offer us, Dr. Kevin Vigil and Mr. Bill Swick. So Gwen, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. It's always a fun hang. I hate keeping it limited to a time because I have a feeling we could just go on and on and on.
I think it's best that we keep it limited.
I agree.
I always have a good conversation with you, Chuck. And thank you again for letting me voice what is becoming a louder and a louder opinion about guitar education and advocacy. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Kevin Vigil, and for the last 17 years, I've been teaching guitar at Heritage High School in Loudoun County, Virginia. I serve as president for the newly formed Virginia Guitar Directors Association. I also serve as the Southern representative for the NAFME Council for Guitar Education. And my daughter says I have yet one other title, and that would be Guitar Rights Activist. She wouldn't be wrong. I am honored to have been invited to present to you today. The title of my presentation is A Seat at the Table, Guitar Education in Virginia. This title was inspired by conversations that I had with Chuck Houlihan when he conducted the 2019 All-Virginia Guitar Ensemble. As we drove from the Washington, D.C. area to the beautiful hills of Hot Springs, Virginia, we kept coming back to the importance of having a seat at the table. Much of this discussion will be within the framework of my roles in the Virginia Music Educators Association, which is the state chapter of the National Association for Music Education. I got my seat at the table in 2015 when Glenn McCarthy passed the proverbial baton to me after he founded and organized the All-Virginia Guitar Ensemble for the previous 2 years. As the chair of the All-Virginia Guitar Ensemble, I had a seat at the table as a member of the VMEA Conference Planning Committee. My presence with VMEA leadership for the last several years has culminated in guitar having its own section under the VMEA umbrella, and on par with band, orchestra, and choir. This new section is called the Virginia Guitar Directors Association. The guiding questions for this lecture are, how did we get to this point? How will things work in this new section? And what challenges do we have moving forward? So how did we get to this point? I believe we came to this point by precedence and building credibility. Now, while guitar in secondary schools has been around since probably the 1960s, organizational precedents that directly led to the formation of the Virginia Guitar Directors Association starts in 2010. It was in 2010 that New Mexico's MEA had its first all-state event, and that was organized by John Truitt. In 2011, the Florida MEA followed suit with its first all-state event, and that was organized by Ed Prassey. In 2011, NAFME formed the Council for Guitar Education with its first chair, Virginian Glenn McCarthy. In 2012, the New Mexico MEA added a vice president for guitar to its constitution, and that vice president was John Truitt. In 2013, the Virginia Music Educators Association Executive Board unanimously approved the formation of the All Virginia Guitar Ensemble with its founder and first chair, Gwen McCarthy. On a side note, that is the ensemble that I have been chairing since 2015. In 2017, the Texas Guitar Directors Association was formed. Edward Bergassi is the president. In 2018, NAFME had its first all-national honors ensemble include the guitar, with Bill Swick as its manager and Michael Quantz as the conductor. In 2018, the Virginia Music Educators Association Guitar Council was formed, and I was charged to chair this council. And by doing so, I got another seat at the table as part of the VMEA Executive Board, but not a voting member. These are all the documented steps that preceded the formation of the Virginia Guitar Directors Association. Building credibility. In 2015, when I chaired the All Virginia Guitar Ensemble for the first time, I thought it was important to reach out to the other musicians that would be at the VMEA Professional Development Conference, whether they be band, orchestra, or choir. How can we get those people to show up to a guitar concert? So I talked to Alan Hirsch. He was our conductor that year. I said, what can we have play with the ensemble that's not guitar? And he recommended his Celtic Suite, which includes flute and violin. Those are the soloists. And I think it could be tin whistle and violin, but we did flute and violin. It was a wonderful piece. The kids loved playing with the other instruments. In fact, I can still remember one girl telling me how it brought tears to her eyes when she heard the flute and the violin come in while they were playing. It just gave her shivers. So it was a wonderful experience for the kids, and that's what this is all about. But on top of that, other professionals showed up. You know, the friends of the flute and violinist were there. And then you get some wind players and some string players that actually show up. So this was a good way to move forward. So 2016 comes, and you talk about credibility. We brought in Matt Denman. I mean, Matt is amazing on his own. But on top of the fact, at that particular time, he was actually the GFA education director. So that brings in a national stamp of approval. Now, when I talked to Matt about what we could have that was not guitar, he recommended string quartet. So we hired a string quartet to come and play Joe Williams' Austin Pictures with this ensemble. An incredible, incredible performance. And guess what? As predicted, string players came to the concert. 2017, Olga Amokina Vera was our conductor. And when I talked to Olga about what we could have that wasn't guitar, she recommended soprano, singing the Bachianas Brasileiras No. 5 by Heitor Villa-Lobos. It was beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, and as predicted, we got vocalists to show up to our concert. 2018 was the 6th year of the All Virginia Guitar Ensemble. We made it past the first 5, and I wanted to celebrate that. So I invited Gwen McCarthy, the founder of the All Virginia Guitar Ensemble, to come and conduct, and he was honored to take the baton. So Glenn comes in 2018 to conduct, but you know, Glenn being Glenn, he didn't want to take all the glory. So actually he invited a few other people to conduct on the program. So in addition to his conducting, we had Alan Hirsch back, and we also had Glenn Kaluta and Miroslav Lonchar conducting on that program. It's a fantastic experience. I call it Glenn and Friends was the theme of that concert. So we didn't really have anything that was not guitar, but it was a really special event. In 2019, we had Maestro Chuck Houlihan. And when I talked to Chuck about what we could have that was not guitar, he chose Rex Willis's Tango Rhapsody that has a flute soloist in it. The flute soloist happened to be my wife, Barbara Vigil, who is retired United States Army Band Pershing Zone. There's a little plug for her. She did a beautiful job playing with the ensemble. And in addition to that being special, there was yet another thing that was really special about that. We did the world premiere of a co-commissioned work by David Leisner called Madonnaless Morning. And that, I think, may have been its only performance so far, because then COVID hit, and I don't think it was able to have its second and third performances. I don't know if it's been rescheduled or not, but it was a really big moment. It brings a lot of credibility to our program. 2020. What can you say about 2020? Oh my goodness. We weren't sure how we were going to move forward, but decided to do a virtual All Virginia Guitar Ensemble program. All the other sections decided not to do a concert. There were no student performances except for ours. And that gave us a lot of street cred, just the fact that we did it. But on top of the fact, we had the only student ensemble performing in this conference in 2020. We had a theme of Virginia composers. So we started with Justin Holland, who was born in Virginia before he moved on. And then we also had Romana Hartmitz, John Graham, Glenn Kaluta, Jeff Tanner, and Miroslav Lonchar. And the last time I checked YouTube of that performance, we have well over 1,600 views. That's an incredible audience for these kids. Just an incredible audience. And it was the featured performance in the conference. In fact, they aired this several times during the conference in 2020. And that gave us a lot of credibility. 2021 was our last event. That was conducted by Martha Masters, none other than the president of the Guitar Foundation of America. Martha is absolutely amazing, and it was so great to be back in person again. And she conducted this under really kind of tight circumstances. We weren't sure if it was going to happen or not, and but it did end up taking place, and it was just fantastic. We had to shorten our rehearsal time by a day, so the kids had to really put it together really, really quickly. We just wanted to minimize, the amount of space the kids were spending in a hotel room. So we had only one night in the hotel instead of two. So it cut back our rehearsal time, but they did a wonderful job, and Martha did an amazing job. We didn't really have something that was not guitar in this one, but we did have something really special. And it's a piece called Covenant Passacaglia from Minneapolis, Minnesota by Thomas Flippen. And it featured an electric guitar, and that was played beautifully by Dr. Matthew Dunlap. Very powerful piece, and symbolized social protest. And I think that was such a moving work. And I couldn't have thought of anything more powerful in that concert. So, in building credibility, programming music that reaches out to people that are not necessarily guitar people, I think is really important to show that we are all musicians. So let's step back to 2018 for a moment. In 2018, that's when the VMEA Guitar Council was formed. And as chair of this council, I had a column in VMEA Notes, which is a triannual publication. Sadly, that publication has been discontinued in favor of a newsletter format. Now, that being said, all of the VMEA Note publications are still available online at vmea.com. Now, this column was not necessarily a seat at the table, but it did give me a platform for guitar education in Virginia. I'll tell you a little bit about these articles that I wrote. The first one was simply an introduction to the new VMEA Guitar Council in 2018. Had their pictures and bios. The second article that I wrote was called Resources for the Guitar Teacher. That's really important because whether or not you know it here in GFA land, but most guitar teachers, most people that are teaching guitar in public education are not themselves guitarists. In fact, there's a 2019 article that I read that said only 7.9% of those who teach guitar consider themselves guitar specialists. So maybe that needs to change, right? So that was my second article. The third article I wrote was called, Does What You Don't Know Hurt? And that was inspired by visiting a school in which this non-guitarist teacher was having their students play for me. They played a piece called Raschiato. Unfortunately, they didn't use the Raschiato technique. They were just plucking like this. And so I asked the students if they knew what Raschiato was, and they didn't. And I looked at the teacher and said, do you know what Raschiato is? And he didn't. And so then I demonstrated it, and they were like, wow, that is so cool. So while it's not the end of the world, maybe it didn't hurt too much, but I would say that's about the equivalent of playing pizzicato instead of using a bow. I don't know. Anyway, I thought it was very important to highlight the fact that if you are not yourself a guitarist, if you see a term, that you should look it up, basically. The next article that I wrote was called Seize Your Moment. Now, this article actually got reprinted in a national NAFME magazine called Teaching Music. So it got reprinted. So it had two publications. Seize Your Moment, and that's a quote by Ernesto de la Cruz. Some of you would know who he is. He is the cartoon character from the movie Coco. And he says, seize your moment. And so I talk about seizing your teachable moment. And this was inspired by yet another, actually a couple of teachers that I was talking to. And they were talking about how, wow, we can't believe how many students have signed up for guitar this coming year. And this is for a middle school. And I said, well, it's Coco. And they're like, what? What do you mean? The drink? I'm like, no, not the drink. Coco. You don't know what Coco is. They didn't know what Coco was. I said, well, it's this incredible Disney Pixar movie, and the kids are loving it. And so I loaned them my copy of Coco, which unfortunately I never got back. But anyway, the article was inspired by them not being familiar with this movie. And the article talks about staying connected with your students, the students that you're teaching. If you are a middle school teacher teaching guitar and you didn't know Coco, wow, that could be a problem, I think. You need to know why you have these students and where they're coming from. The next article that I wrote was called Positioned for Success, and that really is about, it's more of a technical thing in terms of guitar position. So it was a technical article. The next one was Continuity of Education equals Deeper Learning, and that was a result of education in COVID. When we first shut down, what do? We weren't allowed to give new material to the kids. We could only review. So that means that we need to go to a deeper dive with what we have already done. And so that's what that article was about. Our next article here was responding to COVID-19 in the guitar classroom. And there's just some suggestions that I got from our guitar council, and I put that together in an article for there. And then I continued on with my technical articles. The next one was minimizing left hand tension, and I think that would be really helpful for a lot of teachers. And then the next article I wrote was right hand basics, tone or twang. One of the things I've noticed when I've gone to different schools and see these different programs, tone doesn't seem to be a priority. Which is strange, because if you think about a band instrument or a bowed string instrument, those are some of the first things they think about is their tone production, right? And for some reason, people only think about the notes, right, on the guitar. And I think that tone was really important. So I wrote this article, Right Hand Basics, Tone or Twang. Then the next article I wrote was right after we did the proposal for the creation of the Virginia Guitar Directors Association. And the title is Guitar, a Symbol of Change, a reflection of the proposal for the VGDA. And so that's what that article was about. But it was based on an article that was written in the 1960s. And the title of that article was Guitar, Symbol of Change. And then the next article I wrote was called A Guitar for the Non-Guitarist Music Educator. And that was based on a lecture that I gave for the NAFME chapter at Shenandoah University. These were all music education majors. There was only one guitarist in the audience. And so they were just flabbergasted, that, oh, wow, I could actually end up teaching guitar. And I have no pre-service for this, so I haven't had any training for this, and I might actually teach guitar. So that's really, I think it was a really great lecture, and that's what I based this article on. And the final article that I wrote for VMEA Notes before it discontinued was VDOE Resources for Guitar. And that's the Virginia Department of Education Resources. And I'll be talking about that in just a moment. So, 2020, we're there again. This is a big year, really. In 2020, the Virginia Department of Education adopts new fine arts standards of learning. Okay, now in Virginia, our standards are actually called Standards of Learning. I'm not kidding. SOL. Anyway, 2020, the Virginia Department of Education adopts their fine art standards, and guitar is represented in these standards at every level, with 3 levels in middle school and 4 levels in high school, which is consistent with band, choir, and orchestra. Now, that didn't happen all by itself, of course. So let me give you the lowdown on that. So as a member of the VMEA Executive Board, I was present at a meeting in which volunteers were asked to give input for the forthcoming standards. So I worked with our council, the 10 members of the Guitar Council, to create standards specific to guitar. Now, guitar already had standards in the Virginia Department of Education's Standards of Learning, but only 1 level in middle school and 2 in high school. I wanted to create these so that they would be consistent with band, choir, and orchestra. So there would be 3 levels in middle school and 4 levels in high school. Well, our proposed document was published in VMEA Notes in a special edition. And we really worked diligently on that project, and we were really proud of our efforts on that. Now, after the publication of these proposed standards, I was offered the opportunity to apply to be on the Review and Revision Committee for the Virginia Department of Education's Fine Arts Standards of Learning Committee. So I applied and I was accepted, and I had yet another seat at the table. So when I arrived in Williamsburg, Virginia, to join the VDOE Standards of Learning Committee, music was broken down into 4 categories: instrumental music, vocal choral, general music, and music theory. What happened to guitar? We already exist in the Standards of Learning. Where is guitar? It turns out that the Virginia Department of Education decided to put guitar under general music. And I was assigned to the general music and music theory team. I wasn't happy about that. I held my breath for a moment. The first day that we were together with all the teams, it was basically just a training day. This is the procedures that we would run through and the protocols that we use and all of those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, I approached the VDOE Fine Arts Coordinator, and I shared my concerns about guitar being lumped into general music. I shared the fact that the council actually created these documents, so that we had 3 levels in middle school and 4 in high school, and then guitar just kind of got lumped into general music, and I wasn't real thrilled about that. But I made my case about the publication in VMEA notes and that we had put a lot of work and effort into this, and it represented people from all over the state working on this project. So I must have made a compelling argument, because they decided to then put guitar into the team for instrumental music. So at least we went into instrumental music with band, choir, and with band and orchestra anyway, not choir. They had their own team. So we at least got into that. Even though they included guitar into the instrumental thing, I was still not on the team that was writing this. So it was very often that the people on the instrumental part would contact me with questions. There were a couple of people on that team that taught guitar. They were not themselves guitarists, but they did teach guitar, and so they knew some things, and they did their best to implement the standards that we wrote as a council, tried to implement those into these standards. I have to tell you, nobody on the instrumental team was really thrilled about the result of that project. They weren't happy with what they ended up with, and I wasn't completely happy with how that showed up into the standards. But the good news is that guitar then existed 3 levels in middle school, 4 levels in high school, the same as band, choir, and orchestra. So I'll call that a win. In 2021, the Virginia Department of Education created teams to make resources to support the new standards of learning. And I was asked to work on a team that was actually spearheaded by Gwen McCarthy. I've said his name a few times, haven't I? He's an important person in Virginia. I just want to say that. But yet, that gave me another seat at the table. And it was wonderful to work on a team of other guitar educators. And we created a total of 10 resources for the Department of Education. And those are playing guitar charts with open and bar chords. That's one resource. There's another one called Mapping the Guitar Fretboard. Another one is called Single String Jams. Then we have Restringing and Cleaning Classical Guitars. Playing the Blues. No Risk Composition. Teaching Guitar and Ukulele Workshop. Striking a Chord, Primary and Circle of Fifth Chord Progressions. Using Effects and Creative and in the creative process. Introduction to Ukulele. So there were 10 resources created for the Department of Education. They are accessible for any Virginia music educator. And I think that's a big thing for us to show credibility, that we exist and that we can support our colleagues. So looking at 2020 again, in 2020, not only did we do our virtual performance, not only did the standards of learning come out that had guitar at 3 levels for middle school, 4 levels for high school, but also 2020, the president at that time, Alan Hall, tasked our Guitar Council to draft bylaws and event procedures to form a new section for guitar under the VMEA umbrella. So our council met consistently during the COVID lockdown to draft these documents. And I shared this the proposed bylaws and event procedures to the VMEA Executive Board in September of 2021. That gave them time to read and review them before our next Executive Board meeting. So I then proposed the formation of the Virginia Guitar Directors Association at the January 2022 Executive Board meeting. And the Executive Board voted with an overwhelming majority to move forward. Now, once it was approved by the Executive Board, it still had to go to a membership vote, and I am happy to say that the VMEA membership voted in favor of the new section on April 14th, 2022. I now have a new seat at the table as president of the Virginia Guitar Directors Association, a full and voting member of the VMEA Executive Board. So now that we have this Virginia Guitar Directors Association, how's it going to work? Well, first of all, we'll be operational as of July 1. In the meantime, we're going to have a special election for our officers. So we will have a president-elect who will serve for 2 years before becoming president, and then as president for 2 years before becoming the vice president, and they'll serve as the vice president for 2 years before becoming a past president. Now, I am president, but I wasn't elected. I am technically the president pro tempore, and I'll serve in that capacity for the first 2 years of the section, and there will not be a vice president as we start. We will also have a secretary, a treasurer, a middle school representative, and 4 regional representatives. Now, in addition to our all-state program, we're also going to have more localized ensembles. We will have a district guitar ensemble, and we will also have regional guitar ensembles. And these ensembles will have no bearing on the eligibility of our all-state program. So this will give more opportunities for the students and teachers in areas where guitar is not as established. So as I suspect in other states, certainly in Virginia, there are pockets of guitar activity, and there are geographic locations where there's not that much going on. So by having a regional event, we can get more students to participate in that. But not necessarily is it going to have any bearing on the all-state program. A lot of times people don't audition for all-state because they're afraid that they might not have a chance of getting in. So the idea of having these more localized or regional ideas is going to give more opportunities for the students and opportunities for the teachers to give to their students. Now, we are also going to have another event. These are assessments, district assessments, and these are graded events. Now, in order to have a graded district assessment, you have to have graded repertoire. And I've got to give a shout out to 2 members of our guitar council, because Hartwells and Aaron Kunk have spent a lot of time building a database of graded repertoire. Now, they're not finished with this project, but they've got a great start. I think they're sitting at about 150 pieces that they have looked at and graded. Now, these are going to be not only necessary for the assessments, but they're going to be a wonderful resource for teachers so that they can choose repertoire at an appropriate level for the students that they teach. Now, as president, I can create committees, as can the regional representatives. Now, these committees are going to be there to support the various events that I mentioned, but also will continue the advocacy efforts that we've done as a council. So 3 committees that I can tell you about right now that we're going to have. One is a Collegiate Guitar Educators Committee. Another will be a fundraising committee to lower the expenses for the various events so that the student participation fees will be lower. And we'll also have continued efforts on our graded repertoire committee, because there's always new music being published, and it's going to take a long time to get through that list, right? Now, I will also say a bit here about our bylaws and our event procedures. They were all designed keeping in mind the transient nature of guitar educators. What do I mean by transient? Well, simply that most people who are teaching guitar in schools are not themselves guitarists. Based on some research by Robert Pethel that was published in 2019, only about 7.9% of those teaching guitar consider themselves guitar specialists. That means that primarily it's going to be the band and the orchestra and the choir teachers who are actually teaching guitar. So we wanted to set up our system so that it was a little more user-friendly for them. How are we doing that? Well, first of all, we're not going to have a membership fee other than the fact that they need to be a member of NAFME. Now, in VBOTA, which is the Virginia Band and Orchestra Directors Association, there is an additional fee on top of your NAFME fee. And so since these teachers are already paying that fee for being a band director or an orchestra director, why would we tax them again, right, with another fee? So we decided to make this free for them, because they might only be teaching guitar for a year, maybe 2 years. Maybe they'll stick around for the rest of their career and love it. But we decided to get rid of the fee. So they only have to be a member of NAFME to be a member of our VGDA. Another thing that we're doing to make things easier, and we've actually been doing this from the inception of our All-State program, we are doing our auditions really kind of remotely. We have sites all over the state, and that way nobody has to drive all the way to the Capitol to audition. And so we have hosts sites, and those hosts will administer these auditions. It's simply a recording. There's no video involved. It's just an audio recording. Those audio recordings are submitted to the president-elect, who's in charge of the auditions, and those auditions are compiled and then shared with the adjudicators. And the adjudicators do their magic, and we get the scores, and then we select our students. So it's a very streamlined process for the teachers. They don't really have to be that involved in it other than to sponsor the audition with their NAFME membership. So that's one thing that we do to make it more user-friendly, as well as the free dues. But at the end of the day, more students will have the opportunity to participate in higher level events, and these higher level events may also inspire them to audition for our All-State program. And who knows, maybe even the NAFME All National Honors Guitar Ensemble. What challenges do we have moving forward? As excited as I am that guitar now has its own section on par with band, orchestra, and choir, we face several challenges in Virginia, and I suspect nationwide. While the creation of the Virginia Guitar Directors Association is a step toward equity in music education, we're not there yet. In Virginia, it seems that guitar is becoming the instrument that keeps everyone else full-time. And by everyone else, I mean the band, choir, and orchestra directors. Now, to be fair, some of these educators are phenomenal. A case in point would be Chris Perez. He chairs the NAFME Council for Guitar Education. Not only is he a phenomenal organizer, but he is also a stellar educator. And there are several fantastic music educators around the country that are teaching guitar. That being said, empirical evidence suggests that many of these teachers that are teaching guitar that are not themselves guitarists simply are assigned to teach guitar with no previous knowledge or experience. Thus, there is a need and a demand for the Teach Guitar workshops, the Austin Guitar Society Teacher Training Workshop, and Guitars in the Classroom workshops. Pre-service education for guitar is extremely inconsistent. And according to Rob Pethel's research, 68% of guitar educators indicated that they rarely or never participated in guitar-related professional development. And 76.1% of them reported that their pre-service training provided little or no preparation for a career in guitar education. The long-term solution is to have more guitar specialists in the field. The challenge is that principals are not necessarily looking to hire a guitar specialist. In fact, in more cases than not, guitar is the class that keeps the other music teachers full-time. My recommendation, however, is for guitarists who are interested in a music education career to do a music education degree with guitar as the primary and another instrument or voice as a secondary. Be able to teach more than one discipline well. That way, you can be of real service to your students. In the meantime, more quality pre-service guitar method classes should be advocated for in music education. While nearly every program has a piano proficiency requirement, why not have a guitar proficiency requirement? It seems to me, in the music education field, more people are going to be teaching guitar than a piano class, at least in Virginia. In our VMEA, we started a mentor program for teachers who need assistance, and that's a wonderful program. In our VGDA, we're going to start regular sessions for non-guitarist educators to support them on issues of technique, fingerboard logic, repertoire, and anything else for which they need support. I live in a musical family. My wife, Barbara, retired after 26 years of service with the United States Army Band Pershing's Own, playing flute and piccolo. My daughter, Bonnie, is a violin performance major at Baldwin Wallace University. Their music education experiences were rich, rewarding, and recognized. That's not always the case when it comes to guitar, at least not until now in Virginia. I can't wait to see what you do and what you can accomplish when you get your seat at the table.
Hello, I'm Bill Swick, and for the next 45 minutes, I'll be talking about the state of public school classroom guitar in the U.S. I taught guitar at the university level for 20 years, and I taught guitar in public schools for the past 22 years. During that time, I was in charge of all 62 guitar programs in Clark County schools in Las Vegas, and for 4 years was the chair of the NAFME Guitar Council. During those years, I spent time in Washington, D.C., talking to senators and members of Congress, lobbying to keep music in schools and make sure there's funding for it. I learned a lot about education during those years, and I will share some of that I learned with you today. Our outline for our presentation today will cover a brief history of guitars in schools. The question is, why aren't there more qualified guitar teachers? Part 3 is profile of music educators currently teaching guitar in the classroom. Part 4, resources available to guitar teachers, and then there'll be a summary, followed by a question and answer after this presentation. So part 1 is brief history of schools Brief History of Guitar in Schools. Dr. Martha Masters, president of GFA, was enrolled in a guitar class while in high school in the early 1990s while attending Robinson High School in Fairfax, Virginia. Her classes were taught by well-known music educator, lecturer, and director of the popular Gamma Summer Guitar Workshops, Gwen McCarthy. And at the time, it was one of the very few public schools in the entire country that offered classroom guitar. In the past 30 years, much has changed, and today, there's guitar being offered in public schools in every U.S. state. I use Martha Masters as an example for many reasons. First of all, she's the most successful guitarist that I know who also attended guitar class while in high school. Besides becoming a world-class guitarist, she's become a world leader in guitar education, and one who has and will continue to support the concept of music in the schools. When she was in high school, few schools in the whole country were offering guitar. Now, the question is, did attending guitar class in high school motivate Martha to go to college and major in guitar? That's Martha's story to tell. However, the data indicates that less than 5% of students taking guitar while in high school will go to college and major in guitar. And I can tell you from experience, some years it's much less than 5%. I introduced Martha's high school guitar teacher, Gwen McCarthy, as the director of the Gamma Workshops. The Gamma Workshops are available for music educators during the summer to study guitar for 5 days. One may ask, what could be learned about the guitar in only 5 days? In the big picture, the answer is not much. However, many participants double or even triple their knowledge of the guitar and teaching guitar in those 5 days. This is why they are the longest running guitar workshops in the country. There are others, but the Gamma Workshops have been around for a long time and helped a lot of educators. It's believed that the first U.S. secondary school to offer guitar in the classroom occurred in Webster Groves High School in Webster Groves, Missouri in 1964, taught by Dave Martland with the help of well-known publisher and guitarist Mel Bay. The story is that Mel Bay was invited to speak in Washington, D.C. on behalf of music education in the 1950s. Mel Bay shared his vision of having guitar in every school. One politician stood up after his presentation and suggested that the U.S. would put a man on the moon before there'd ever be guitar in a school classroom. Mel Bay was motivated by this response. And while it took him almost 10 years to make it happen, in his neighborhood school, it did happen before the first lunar visit. Just a few years later, in 1968, well-known guitarist and author Jerry Snyder started a guitar program at Piedmont High School in San Jose, California. His program was so popular that the following year, Jerry helped start guitar programs in 12 more schools in the San Jose area. While there could have been other school programs in the 1960s in existence, these guitar programs are well documented. We can say that some of the earliest public school guitar programs in the U.S. began in the mid-1960s. So now we have a starting point of our history of the guitar in the United States. Now, that's public schools. How about colleges? At the time that these first public school classes began, there were few colleges and universities in the United States that offered degrees in guitar, or even a music education degree with an emphasis in guitar. In 1959, Bill Fowler started a guitar program at the University of Utah. The following year, in 1960, Sophocles Pappas and Aaron Shear began the first guitar program at the American University in Washington, D.C. In 1962, Aaron Shear also began another guitar program at the Catholic University of America, also in Washington, D.C. Jose Silva started a guitar program at the University of North Carolina in 1964. And the same year, Richard Provost started the guitar program at Hart College at the University of Heartland in Connecticut. These are examples of some of the earliest college programs. Basically, 1960 is a key year for the start of guitar in any college. So that's sort of kind of the line we're going to draw in the sand. We're going to say there may be some before, but 1960 is when public schools started taking off and colleges started taking off. Now, there's a well-known music educator who wrote a book, not a book, but an article in 1967 entitled The Guitar Symbol of Change, and that was Dr. Meyer Kahn. Dr. Kahn was convinced that adding guitar to public schools was going to improve conditions in education. And in his article, he asked two questions. Where does one quickly find 1,000 licensed guitar teachers? And number two, where does one find the teachers to prepare those teachers? 55 years later, after writing the article, we are barely halfway to completing Kahn's vision of guitar in every public school. The purpose of citing the early history of guitar in America is to stress that the history of guitar education in the United States has only been around for about 60 years. My colleagues who are my age or older can remember when there was no guitar education in the United States. We have watched the development of guitar education in the United States, including the creation of the GFA in 1973. The development of guitar offered in schools, both secondary and post-secondary, has happened during my lifetime. I too can remember being college age and not having a lot of offers, not having a lot of opportunities to study guitar. So I've watched this happen in my lifetime, and I just want to share some of that with you. So this concludes part one. Okay, part two asks the question, why aren't there more qualified guitar teachers? Since the 1990s, the development of guitar education in the United States has exploded to the point there are now guitar classes being offered in every state of the union. In addition, most colleges of music now offer degrees in guitar, including advanced degrees, and many offer degrees in music education with an emphasis in guitar. While these offerings are in place, the current reality is that most university faculty guitar instructors learn from the model of giving or taking one lesson a week and continue teaching that way. How does one learn how to teach 30 or more students at a time for an hour a day, 5 days a week, when their only model has been one lesson a week with one-on-one? Many college guitar students are discouraged from going the education route for many reasons. It's too much work. The pay to become a teacher, a public school teacher, is too low. You will not be able to pursue your solo guitar career if you become a public school teacher. you can make just as much money teaching privately as teaching in a public school. Many students are discouraged from going into education by their private teachers. Students who choose the education route are not considered serious students. For whatever reason, guitar teaching positions are not being filled simply because there's not enough qualified guitar professionals with education degrees and a state teacher's license. For the past 20 years, schools have been faced with the problem that today's students do not have the interest in playing in school band or orchestra like they once did in the past. Offering guitar is a way to attract students to the music department. Many states require that every high school graduate complete at least 1 year of fine arts credit. A music class can fulfill that credit, particularly a guitar class. Schools today are faced with making certain that students have plenty of opportunities to fulfill their requirement of that fine arts credit and offer a host of music classes like guitar, handbells, mariachi, music theory, music technology, rock band, and so on. It's estimated that 80% of all music education students today who are enrolled in college will need to teach one or more of these classes once accepting a public school teaching position. The numbers are just not there for music colleges to graduate enough music education majors with an emphasis guitar. As mentioned, guitar faculty have been known to discourage students from going into music education. What are schools, public schools, particularly state schools, supposed to do? For now, the answer is to have someone teach guitar class that has an education degree and a state teacher's license, regardless if they can play the guitar or not. Part 3 is the profile of music educators currently teaching guitar in the classroom. In this segment, we're going to look at the results of 4 national surveys given to music educators who are currently teaching one or more classes of guitar in a school environment. And we're going to look at one survey given to college graduates with degrees in guitar performance. The combined results of these surveys have been helpful in understanding who is in the classroom, what skills they may or may not have, and how differently educators look at the guitar as a viable, serious musical instrument. In 2007, the GFA Education Council did a national survey on college graduates with degrees in guitar performance and identified approximately 1,100 college graduates with performing degrees in guitar, many with advanced degrees, who were either underemployed or unemployed. Most were generating their only income from teaching private lessons, did not have health insurance, did not have a retirement plan, and still owe money on student loans. We found the results of this survey alarming and frustrating at the same time. We were aware of the many teaching positions that were open, going unfulfilled, as well as the many talented, unemployed guitarists, but we could not match the two together due to the lack of an education degree and a state teacher's license. This was 15 years ago, and little has changed since that time. Meanwhile, in 2007, public schools in the United States were hiring every graduate with an education degree they could find. Simply put, there were not anywhere nearly enough guitar educators to fill the available teaching positions. Many music educators were hired to teach band, choir, or orchestra when being asked to also teach a guitar class. Many of these educators did not play guitar, had no idea how to teach guitar. Little has changed with this in the past 15 years as well. Today, there's still a huge guitar teacher shortage. The growth of guitar education has been stunted due to the lack of teachers. In December 2014, NAFME, the National Association for Music Education, did a survey of members in an effort to identify how many music educators were teaching guitar. 1,273 music educators responded. Less than 8% of respondents said that guitar was their area of concentration. 14% responded that guitar was their primary instrument. Now, this sounds a little confusing because there's 8% saying that this was their area of concentration and 14% saying that guitar was their primary instrument. But what we discovered was that 6% of these respondents attended a college that did not offer guitar education as a choice. And I can say from my own experience as an education major, when I was in college, even though I majored in guitar, I could not get a degree in guitar education simply because there was no place to student teach in guitar. And so the university wouldn't offer an education degree in guitar. So 6% of guitarists couldn't get a guitar education at the college that they attended. When asked if guitar pedagogy was included in college training, 60% replied no. When asked if you follow your state's curriculum for guitar education, 32%, 1/3 of all respondents answered no. That response in itself is alarming. This is saying 1/3 of teachers are not following the state required curriculum. More alarming, however, is 55% answered their state does not have guitar curriculum. That means that 87% to the total teachers were not following the state curriculum. That is alarming. So please be aware that no class may be offered by a public school for credit towards graduation without an approved curriculum on file with the state's Board of Education. The first step towards offering any new class for credit is to write and file a curriculum that must be approved by the State Board of Education. Many states have professional curriculum writers. Some states simply copy approved curriculum from other states. 87% of the music educators who are not following their state curriculum perhaps just did not know where to look, or perhaps no administrator has ever asked if the teacher is following the state-approved curriculum. When it comes to education, every state is an individual. Now, this is hard to understand. Every state is individual when it comes to education. Some states put all of their standards under the umbrella music. Others use the umbrella fine arts. And yet some states have specific standards for each area of music. The first step to find the state standards is to Google the state's name, followed by State Board of Education. So for example, you'd say Nevada State Board of Education. This is a start. Some states may require more digging, but one should be able to find the state standards if you're looking for them. In 2018, I did a survey of 100 guitar teachers who are active members of the National Association for Music Education and active classroom guitar teachers. And we learned that only 32% had majored in guitar in college. So these surveys are kind of giving us some duplication of information. This means that 2/3 of all guitar teaching positions were filled by music educators who had never studied guitar seriously or never studied guitar at all. From that group, we learned a number of other important facts to help us understand the state of public school classroom guitar in the U.S. One more fact about the survey. We selected only 2 teachers from each of the 50 states to participate. And just to kind of clarify that, we were very particular about who we picked. And in most cases, we tried to pick the 2 most outstanding teachers in each state. And so we would think that this would give us a very positive survey. And even picking the top 2 teachers of every state who teach guitar, we found out that 2/3 weren't really qualified to be teaching guitar. We learned that 43% of the 100 teachers are active members in GFA. As mentioned, only 32% majored in guitar in college. We learned that there is a great division amongst music educators as to what type of guitars to use, what pedagogy to teach, what style of music to teach, and even if it's important to teach students how to read music or not. The numbers from this survey indicate there's a division that's nearly equal. Let's say there are 2 schools of thought when it comes to teaching guitar in the classroom. Here are the numbers from this survey from one group, which makes up half of all the teachers. Half the teachers use nylon string guitars. Half the teachers teach note reading. Half of the teachers feel qualified to write their own method book, ensemble arrangements, and teaching materials. This is the one that really surprises me because, if I were to find 100 band directors and I said, okay, how many in here have written their own book? Almost no one's going to raise their hand. But in a guitar situation, 100 teachers and 50, in this case, raised their hand and said, I've written my own book or my own curriculum or I use my own materials, which I find that just fascinating. I don't even know how to interpret that, why guitar teachers would know so much about how to write curriculum when someone like a band director or orchestra teacher wouldn't even begin to think about writing their own methods. Half of the teachers rehearse the class as a large ensemble, similar to orchestra. Half the teachers have more than 5 years of teaching experience. And that 5 years is key to public school teaching. I'm not exactly sure what the percentage is, but it's very high. It's a very high percentage of college graduates who go into teaching and never make it to the 5th year. So once you make it to the 5th year, you may be much more likely to make a career out of teaching. In our school district, you have to put in 5 years before you qualify for a retirement program. But we have a lot of teachers who give it up after just 2 years or 3 years. So 5 years is sort of the line in the sand for suggesting if you're going to make it as an educator or make it as educator as your career. So that's half of the teachers in this 100 survey. The other half of the teachers use steel strings in their classroom. They teach tab or no note reading at all. They teach popular music, teach only chords, and they may or may not use a method book. And they do not play in ensembles. In the big picture, guitar education is only taken seriously by educators who have studied guitar. This survey suggests that only 1/3 of the students taking guitar are receiving quality instruction. The results also suggest that half of all teachers teaching guitar in the classroom do not take it seriously and spend almost no preparation time for teaching this class. There's one other observation worth sharing here as well. The most successful guitar programs tend to be found on the east and west coastal states and the states located below the 40 north latitude. Any successful program found above the 40-degree north latitude are the exception and not the norm. And I have a map that we can look at to show you what that looks like. Earlier this year, we surveyed 1,589 members of the Facebook group School Guitar Teachers. Members of this group have a school email, and they indicate where they are actively teaching guitar in a school classroom. We had responses from 30 different states and 2 foreign countries, Texas being the state with the most responses. From this group, we learned that only 25% of our responders took a pedagogy class in guitar while attending college. We also learned that only 21% of teachers from this group approached teaching guitar as an ensemble. In this survey, only 34% replied that they were prepared to teach guitar in the classroom. Once again, this is sort of the same number that we see from previous surveys. About 1/3 of all teachers feel like they were prepared to teach guitar in the classroom. Only 66% replied that they were familiar with their state standards for guitar and were following them. Over half of the teachers responding have 61 or more guitar students in their program. In 2019, Rob Pethel was writing his doctorate dissertation, and I assisted him in doing a survey which involved 1,029 confirmed guitar teachers, all of which were members of NAFME. This group is more stable from the school guitar teachers group. The majority of the teachers in this group are over the age 31, and almost half have 16 or more years teaching experience. What this suggests is these educators started at a school teaching band, choir, or orchestra, and gradually ended up teaching guitar as well. Of this 1,029, only 8% responded that they started teaching as a guitar teacher. So 92% started as band, choir, and orchestra. From this group, 75% teach at the secondary level, meaning grades 6 through 12. Only 6% responded that they had participated in some form of professional development training related to guitar. Only 18% responded there's a fine arts coordinator, guitar task force chair, or district music supervisor to go to for related questions. I mentioned that in my career teaching with Clark County, I was also the task force chair for 22 years. And so I know what that role is, of supervising all the teachers and being the kind of the go-to person for this district for anything guitar related. And in this case, only 18% of all the teachers that responded to this 2019 survey have a person like that in their school district. Less than 4% responded that there is representation of guitar education at their state's music education conference. So every state has a MEA conference. So if your state is, for my state's Nevada, so it'll be the Nevada Music Educators Association. Everyone has an MEA as part of the NAFME program, except Texas. Texas has a TMEA, Texas Music Educators Association, but it's not associated with NAFME. But every state has an MEA. So what this said is that only 4% responded that there's guitar representation. And again, I'm not sure what the exact numbers are, but I think there are now 12 or 13 all-state guitar ensembles in the nation out of the 50 states. So that's still not a high percentage, less than 20, not quite 20%. A little bit more than 20%, less than 25%. So we need to see more of representation of guitar education in the MEA conferences. Less than 10% responded that they have a network of guitar educators that they can contact. 75% responded that their preparation in college was not adequate for teaching guitar in the classroom. All of this suggests that music educators teaching guitar are likely to feel alone, feel isolated, feel unsupported, and feel unprepared. Having said all of this, the question is, are there any quality school guitar programs in the United States? And the answer is absolutely. However, as mentioned, they're going to be found in your coastal states and states below the 40-degree north latitude. Also, they're likely to be found in small clumps and clusters. For example, in my state, Nevada, we have 62 schools with guitar, but in Las Vegas, if you were to go to northern Nevada, you wouldn't see anything like that. Same thing with California. You'll see them in small clumps and clusters. Same thing as a state like Florida. There's a lot of guitar education in Florida, but they're not. They're throughout the entire state. They're not all grouped together. There are at least 2 or 3 dozen outstanding leaders in public school guitar education right now. These leaders have several things in common. They are accomplished guitarists. They have a strong knowledge of guitar pedagogy. They have experience performing in ensembles and conducting ensembles. They have an extensive knowledge of guitar ensemble repertoire. They have an extensive knowledge of solo guitar repertoire. They understand tone production and know how to teach required skills. They have a clear plan how to take a beginning student and transform each student into a musician. And they're familiar with the NAFME guitar best practices and adhere to them. These are just 8 points that the leaders in guitar education share. There are possibly other things that we can be added to the list, but for now, this is a good start. Most college graduates who have majored in guitar education will have many of these skills. This is why it's important to increase the number of graduating guitar education majors. Public schools need qualified guitar teachers. Part 4, resources available for guitar teachers. The next question is if you are a music educator interested in teaching guitar in the classroom, where would you begin to look for resources that will help you provide the information needed to be successful? Let's start with the GFA. GFA has a dedicated website guitarfoundation.org. There's a drop down for teachers with links to teacher resources, teacher network, education standards, and student opportunities. There's an abundance of information at this site. The National Association for Music Educators has its own website, nafme.org, N-A-F-M-E.org. Simply type the word guitar in the search bar, and there will be countless options to choose from. There's a lesser known organization, the National Guitar Directors Association. Its website is classroomguitar.com. The entire website is dedicated to resources for classroom teachers. These three websites combined offer a tremendous number of resources for music educators teaching guitar in the classroom. Become familiar with these sites and make them your go-to resources, as they're constantly being updated with new materials. In addition, I do publish a free weekly newsletter with collectively over 400 pages of supplementary teaching materials intended to be used in the classroom, which are in alignment with the NAFME Best Practices for Guitar Education. You may subscribe to the newsletter at no cost by going to guitarintheclassroom.com. guitarintheclassroom.com. If you sign up, you will receive a weekly newsletter labeled by the quarter and the week of the school year. For example, quarter 1, week 1, quarter 1, week 2, and so on. There'll be materials to create your weekly lesson plans. The level materials is designed to follow the NAFME Best Practices for Guitar Education, and there are materials for 3 levels of skill: beginning, intermediate, and advanced. In addition, there are links to guitar-related articles and YouTube videos. 7 years ago, Oxford University Press approached me to write a book on how to teach guitar in a public school setting. Today is the best-selling guitar-related book in their catalog. It took 2 years to write, and I wrote it for the many music educators who are currently teaching guitar and need guidance. It took 2 years to write, and at the time, 35 years of experience. The book is entitled Teaching Beginning Guitar Class, A Practical Guide, and it's available on Amazon.com. In addition, I have a new book from Oxford University Press that is now available on Amazon as a pre-order that focuses on teaching any of the innovative music classes. While it's centered around guitar, the information may apply to any music class. The title is Building an Award-Winning Guitar Program, a Guide for Music Educators. It's scheduled to be available this July. The content of this book is not pedagogy, but the business of teaching and building a sustainable music program. Many skills taught in this book are not necessarily skills learned while studying music education in college. As mentioned earlier, Gamma offers 5-day workshops designed to help music educators with the skills necessary to teach classroom guitar. Also, Austin Curriculum is offering workshops during the summer as well. My experience is teachers who need the most help are least likely to ask for it. Find a mentor. Do not hesitate to ask. Join NAFME and get involved with your state's MEA. Part 5, Summary. According to data, according to Data USA, in 2020, 27,047 college students graduated with music degrees in the United States. That's 27,047 with music degrees in the United States. This is not just guitar, this is all music students. From these graduates, there were a total of 4,774 who graduated with music education degrees. This indicates that only 17% of music students nationwide are pursuing a music education degree. A recent survey done at the Indiana University indicates that 75% of music education graduates find work in their field within 4 months of graduation. This is the highest employment level of any college degree included in this study. The same study indicates that for other subjects, only 25% of college graduates find employment in their field of study within 4 months of graduation. Your chance of finding employment is 3 times greater than any other major if you have a music education degree. I am very aware that this presentation is full of a lot of data and may be a little overwhelming. It's taken years and a lot of effort to collect the information that has been shared in this presentation. I sincerely hope you find some of the content beneficial. Many years ago, while taking or attending a lecture, the presenter shared his experience as an educator. He said that sometimes he has to read 2 or even 3 books before finding a nugget of information that he is likely to be able to apply to his daily teaching. He went on to say that when he attends lectures or presentations, it is his hope to be exposed to a maximum of 2 nuggets that he may apply to everyday teaching. If he walks away from a presentation knowing 2 more things than he knew before attending, he is most satisfied and he sees the experience as a positive one. His story resonated with me, and I have adopted the same philosophy when attending lectures. Just as importantly, I have adopted the same philosophy when preparing a presentation. I prepare with the hopes of providing everyone with at least 2 nuggets of information that may be applied to your daily teaching. So if you walk away from this presentation knowing at least 2 pieces of information that you did not previously know, please consider this a successful exchange. In summary, Aaron Shear asked the question, why is the guitar generally played so badly, both technically and musically, that serious doubts arise in the minds of many musicians as to its validity as a medium for high-level music expression? The data collected from our survey suggests that 60% of all public school music educators have minimum skills for playing, modeling, and teaching the guitar. And these teachers are collectively teaching thousands of guitar students. It is possible that offering guitar in public schools, as is currently being taught, is actually lowering the standards for guitar, not raising it like one may think. Something to think about.